We're joined now on MASN All Access by Eve Rosenbaum, who's the new Director of Baseball Development with the Baltimore Orioles. You're a Bethesda native who grew up an Orioles fan. What was it like getting the call that you were going to be joining your hometown team?
It was just so surreal. Honestly, it's still surreal to look out from my office and see the field. I go back and I look at the family photos we have in our basement. That's me and my brothers, standing out there in the green seats. We're like 6 years old. It's just so crazy to look at that photo and to think now I'm helping to run the team.
So let's talk about your history with the Astros specifically, because you worked in the international scouting department for the most part. International
scouting is fascinating. I love it because it is really pure scouting. You're going out and you're watching very young players and you're projecting what they're going to be like in 5-10 years. And there's not a lot of information available. But that has started to change. Even 5 years ago when I started, you would go and you would see the player in person and you would take notes and you put in your report, and the team of scouts would get together with their director and so forth and make a decision. And just in the last 5 years, there's more information creeping up. So just even simple information about the player's height and weight, about their parents, where they live, and then all of the new technology sort of baseball stats, that's starting to creep into international as well. So you have MLB running showcases, and then they're sending out stats, and they're sending out exit velocities, and they're sending out sprint times. Another big change though has been the shift to younger players. So when I first started 5 years ago, we were scouting 15 and 16-year-olds, and then the industry has sort of shifted, and now you have some teams who scout 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds.
So you mentioned Kobe Perez earlier. Obviously you haven't been in this organization for too long, but what have you learned so far being in this organization about how the Orioles specifically under Kobe Perez have bolstered their international scouting department?
Yeah, so from what I've seen, it just went from almost nothing to a fully functioning department. And when he came in, it was him and maybe one or two other guys, and now we're signing players. We just signed a bunch of players about a month ago, and we're scouting, the 15-year-olds and the 14-year-olds, and really building up our database, our knowledge of these players. So it's like a drastic change from what I can tell.
When you're scouting a guy who's 12, 13 years old, and then you can't really get your hands on developing him until he's in the organization at 16 or 17 years old, he might be a very different player because he wasn't developed right, or he was developed a different way than you might have. Is that a challenge as well?
Yeah, that can be. Yeah, and that's one of the, the risks of the teams who commit players at a very young age, who go out and commit players at 12, 13, 14, because they're making a commitment to pay this player a lot of money, but then they don't get their hands on him for 2 or 3 years. So that's one of the risks that those teams take. You're just sort of looking back and hoping that the agent takes care of the player, and you can kind of go and check on the player yourself and just say like, hey, how are your workouts going? How are you eating? You can kind of provide advice on the side, but nothing official.
So in terms of your current role with the team, being the Director of Baseball Development, how much does that differ from your previous role in Houston?
It's definitely different in that in Houston I was 100% focused on international scouting. And here I'm focused on international, but then also the draft, and then pro scouting as well. And really what underlies all of those in terms of our strategy and our methodology, so sort of our philosophy of how we want to evaluate players in those markets, and then what tools are available to us. So I'm working on building up the digital infrastructure and building out tools that our R&D department can research and learn things, and then they can develop it and turn it into this really cool tool, and then our scouts are able to utilize that to make more informed decisions. And then during the season, I'll be also working with our player development staff in terms of what they're learning on the field about the players, and then taking that information back and making sure that we're incorporating that knowledge when we draft players and when we sign players in international.
Awesome. Well, it's so great to have you sit down here on MASN All Access. Just several months into the organization, but getting your first taste of Sarasota baseball as well.
Yeah, it's great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sure, no problem.
Eve Rosenbaum, Director of Baseball Development, sitting down with us here on MASN